Hey everybody, John here from All Miniatures Great and Small, and today we're going to be talking about the new Africa book. I'm going to be reviewing the Africa book, the new North Africa book, in a couple of episodes. This one, the first one, I wanted to talk about the new Wildcard units and what that means. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to address the elephant in the room. I think this is going to be the most controversial aspect of this book, and depending on how you feel about your historical gaming, you're going to either love them or hate them or be indifferent to them. So what is a wild card? In the new book, we have a wild card slot in the force organization. So the wild card's been there for a while. I can't remember the first book I saw it in, but no one knew what it was really for. Wiser minds than me probably guessed or surmised that it probably is for what we're going to talk about here, but I didn't know what it was. So wild cards are basically hypothetical or prototype units. If you've played previous versions of Flames of War, this is the mid-war monsters release, basically, in essence repackaged for version 4. So it'll be interesting. Mid-war monsters is something I did not get into when I played version 3, but I really didn't do a lot of desert battles or mid-war battles at all in version 3. I was more of a late war and early war kind of guy. In version 4, I think I built my first dedicated mid-war army with my Americans. So I never really hopped on that bandwagon for the mid-war monsters. The community back in version 3 was kind of torn on them. Some people liked the additional options, and some people just hated them because they weren't in North Africa, so why have them in the game as an option? And that same argument is going to be brought up here, but again, that's going to be something that you as hobbyists are going to decide with your hobby dollar. So what this video is, or what we're going to do, is just talk about those new wildcard units that have the wildcard keyword, or however you want to do it, that'll fill this wildcard slot. There are some other mid-war monsters that made it into the book properly that don't count as wildcards, and we are not going to cover them in this video. Alright, so let's dive in and talk about the units, and then at the end I'll share my thoughts with you, and let's see what kind of discussion we can have in the comments. Alright, so the first one we'll talk about is the German one. I think it's the most underwhelming as far as options. What we're getting is a Tiger P or Porsche. This is an alternate version of the Tiger, and it looks pretty cool. I mean, it looks different from a traditional Tiger. The one in the book here is obviously painted in a Eastern Front theme, but it's a cool looking tank. The problem is, or I don't know what the problem is, but it really doesn't differ too much from a normal Tiger. The only difference I can tell is that it has a slower tactical speed. It's slower 8 inches instead of 10 inches. And it's the same exact price as a Tiger tank, a normal Tiger. So really, as a German kind of Africa Corps player, the only reason to get a Tiger P is if you like how it looks, right? It's not gaining you anything tactically by playing with it. And if I remember correctly, like most of these that we're going to talk about, this is in the World of Tanks video game as well. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool looking Tiger. A Tiger is a Tiger, and AT-14 is nothing to sneeze at. So it's a pretty cool looking thing, but being slightly worse than a normal Tiger for the same price, I just don't see people taking it. That plus, I believe, and I could be wrong at this point, but I believe all of these are going to be the old resin and metal kits. I don't think any of these things are going to be in plastic. So they're probably going to be pricier tank, on a per tank basis in real world money than going with the cool plastic Tiger kits that Battlefront has out. All right, so that is the Tiger P. Next up, we're hopping over to the Italians. The Italians also have one Wildcard unit, and that is the Semoventi 90. The Semoventi sounds like something you might order at Starbucks. I'd like a Semoventi with cream, please. But it is an interesting little tank. It's basically like a mobile anti-tank gun in the same vein as something like a Martyr or something like that. It's got a really nice 90mm gun, so it's got a anti-tank of 14, 3+ firepower, 40-inch range, so basically on par with like a German 88. But it's in a rather small little package. The Semoventi has a front armor 4. It's hit on a 3. It is very slow, tactical of only 4 inches. Terrain dash is 10, cross country is 14, cross check 3+, which is pretty decent. Overall, it's an interesting option. It brings some more mobile high AT to the Italians, and the Italians do have some high AT in their other 90mm options, like the big gun that's on the back of the truck and so on. Next up, we're going to talk about the British. So the British get a couple of wildcard units. The first one we're going to talk about is the Churchill GC 3-inch gun carrier. It is interesting because it's a Churchill chassis, but it's got a hull-mounted gun. It is like many Churchills, front armor 8, side 7, top armor 2, so really well armored for mid-war. 88s are still going to punch right through it, but anything lower than that, the Churchill is going to have a decent chance to bounce it outright. Overall, though, it comes with a 3-inch gun with a 32-inch range, AT-11 3+ firepower. So, I mean, pretty good. The AT-11 is going to be better than the AT-10 you're going to find on the British Shermans and whatnot. The 3-inch gun is forward firing, but with AT-11 you're not going to be threatening Tigers too well, particularly at range. You could get lucky and Tiger could roll a 1 for its armor save, but it's really not going to duel Tigers. Otherwise, I think everything else in the German arsenal needs to be weary of those guys, and they come into around, I believe, 7 points each or something like that. So, and you can take up to 3 of them, which is pretty cool. So maybe not 7 points. Maybe they're more like 14 points each. Yeah, I think that's right. So very interesting looking Churchill, and it gives you a new design. Next up is, I think, the ever popular TOG 2 tank, which is interesting. If you have played World of Tanks, TOGs for a while were everywhere. They are not quite as well armored as a Churchill, with the front armor 5, side armor 5, top armor 2. So still a decent armor layout, not as good as like a Sherman or an up-armored Panzer, but front armor 5 is okay. But it comes with a 17-pounder, so its gun is actually better than the Churchill gun carrying 3-inch. With that 17-pounder, you got a 36-inch range, and AT-12 3+ firepower is really nice. It's a slow tank as well. It's only 8 inches, so similar to the other British infantry tanks. Terrain dash is only 8. Cross country is 10. You're not going anywhere quickly with a TOG, even if you're dashing. Road dash in a TOG is the same as like a tactical for most medium tanks, which is pretty interesting. All right, and then last but not least, we've got, which I think is probably the coolest, my favorite of the British ones, is the Boarhound Armored Car Troop. So the Boarhound is really nice. It's an armored car, but with a front armor 4, side armor 3, and it carries a high velocity 57mm gun that gives it anti-tank 10 4+ firepower. So almost in the range of, again, like a British Sherman with its 75 millimeter gun. Firepower is not quite as good, but it can really bully most vehicles that you're going to encounter, except maybe up-armored Panzers and Tigers, obviously. But AT-10 is nothing to laugh at in mid-war. The 8-wheeled Boarhound just looks really cool. With the front armor that it has, it's I think it could actually be pretty useful because it does come with the Scout and Spearhead rules. If I were a British player, I would probably consider this one. If I were to consider any, I would consider this one as my wild card for my force. For the Americans, we start with the M6 heavy tank. The M6 is a really interesting looking design. It was actually built but never made it over into combat. It has a front armor of 8, side of 5, top armor of 2. So almost pushing Tiger levels of armor, or more like I guess Churchill levels of armor here, which is pretty nice. It is equipped with a 3-inch gun and a 37 millimeter gun, as well as just 50 caliber machine guns, 4 dice of 50 caliber machine guns, which is really nice. You'll see here it says rate of fire 3, and I believe that's a mistake. I believe it's only be rate of fire 2, but watch Battlefront and see where that goes. But I'm pretty sure that's got to be a mistake. But it does have that 3-inch gun, same gun that the M10 has. So it is anti-tank 12, anti-tank 12, 3+ firepower. So this can threaten a Tiger, and a Tiger can threaten this. So it's pretty interesting. The interesting thing about the M6, I think it just brings a new dynamic with front armor 8 to the American kind of toolbox. The Americans typically, they max out, I believe, at front armor 6 with the, if you take the Sherman, mid-war Sherman. And that is pretty good, but jumping up to front armor 8, the British are already used to it. The Germans have something higher, but the Americans don't. So front armor 8 is giving them, a really interesting option. All of a sudden, the short-barreled Panzers aren't really a threat to this guy at all. But again, the Tigers and the up-armored could conceivably take it out. But pretty good. I think one of these is going to run about 13, 14 points off the top of my head. But it's good. And then I don't know if it's going to have the same rule as the Lee, where it can fire both of its guns at the same time or not. But it's interesting that it's got the 37 millimeter as well, which is pretty nice. The 37 millimeter doesn't have the no HE special rule. It's not hindered by that. So maybe if you're firing at gun teams, the 37 mil will be the better option. The other mid-war monster that we're going to get is the, I guess Wildcard, not mid-war monster, is the T-55 Interceptor tank destroyer. So, cool name, Interceptor, I like it. It also has a 3-inch gun. It has 8 wheels. Maybe I'm a sucker for things with 8 wheels because I think this looks really, really cool. But it's got that 3-inch gun like the M10, like the M6 Heavy we were just talking about. So anti-tank 12, 3+ firepower. It's a 4 firing, no HE. It does have a 50 cal for air defense. This thing has no armor though. Maybe they should talk to the guys who built the Boarhound and slap some armor on this. So basically, this is another option, and I believe it's going to be a significantly cheaper option than taking M10s in an American list. So if you want to have that AT-12 firepower to kind of threaten things like Tigers from getting too close and things like that, or just outranging your opponents, you might look at this instead of the M10. It's a little bit cheaper, but it's going to have the same gun. Same tactical speed. It's got a terrible cross-check compared to an M10 and no armor compared to an M10, but it brings that 3-inch gun, brings more anti-tank 12 into into your list. So I think that one's going to be an interesting option as well. Since these are wild cards, you can only take one or the other. You can't take both, and I like that as a way to limit so that you're not just filled up with all these wild card units, mid-war monsters. All right, let me give you my final little thoughts about this. So again, there's going to be those players that just hate this idea, and this will ruin the whole book for them. And I get where they're coming from, but I also think it's real easy to, if you don't want to play with these, don't play with them. Again, I think these are all going to be resin and metal models, so they're going to be pricey. I don't imagine I'm going to be buying many of these, but if you don't want to play with them, don't play with them, and you're fine. As far as your friends playing with them, that's what having a social gaming contract is for with your friends. If you don't want to play with them, chat with your opponent before the battle and decide if you're not going to have them or you are. I think wild cards are one of those things you're probably going to want to talk about before every battle. Are we going to play with wild cards or are we not? I think it actually should be an optional thing. Like if your opponent doesn't want to play with wild cards, I don't think you should play with wild cards. I can also imagine tournaments will probably be saying no wild cards or wild cards. And if that's the case, again, player choice. If you don't want to play wild cards, don't go to a tournament that has that as an option. And obviously, if they don't advertise it, contact the tournament organizer and they can tell you. I imagine also, because wild cards aren't all of the mid-war monsters from that old range, there are some more hypothetical or prototype tanks that made it into this book that we didn't talk about that are not classified as wild cards, and those I would probably recommend treating the same way. Like if I was playing a historical tournament, I would ban all of those as well as the wild card units. And when I say all of those, like for example, the Americans get the T-14, which is like an armored, up-armored Sherman, if you will, and never fought in Africa, so I imagine if you want to play historically, you're not going to have that in your list. So it's I think that all we're doing is we're getting more options on how we play with our little tanks, and to me that's a good thing, as long as your friends agree with you and you set that before you build your list. That's a good thing. The other thing I'd like to talk about is the disparity in this book. The British and the Americans, the Allies, receive significantly more wildcard units than the Germans and the Italians. The Germans and Italians only get one each. The British get 3. The Americans get 2. So that's five wildcards versus 2 for the Axis. And that's a big difference, considering too that the one and only German wildcard is a Tiger that, while it looks cool, is not better than the normal Tiger. In fact, it's slightly worse. So I don't know, as a German player, why would I ever want to play with the wild cards active? Because all of a sudden the Americans could be bringing more AT-12 and the Germans don't get any bonus. Now I imagine that is because the Germans are going to show up in the Eastern Front mid-war, and I bet they're going to get more of those. Like in the old mid-war monsters, I think they had the Dicker Max, that big giant gun. And there's others. For you guys who are more versed with mid-war monsters than me, please do sound off in the comments below. But so I imagine with the Allied mid-war desert forces, we're not going to get another book with American or British mid-war tanks in it. So I think they dumped everything for the Allies in this book, and then they're probably splitting the Germans, maybe the Italians, over 2 books. Now, that's just my my guess. I don't have any inside knowledge to what Battlefront is doing, but if I had to guess, I would think that's it. So overall, you know, I think they're fun. I don't think they're going to ruin the mid-war experience if they show up on the table from time to time. The only concern I have is just the up firepower of this. I can imagine lots of people looking at you know, the desert for the first time and seeing some really good tanks. They're going to gravitate to them even though they were fictional or just prototypes and never made it to the field, over more historical tanks. And I would think that's a shame. It's kind of like how like German players always, you know, the new German players gravitate towards Tigers and Panthers first, which is totally fine because those are cool-looking tanks. But here you're going to have cool-looking stuff that didn't exist or existed in very small numbers that people might gravitate towards first. And that might be a shame. But overall, I think if you, again, have it out with your potential players, and decide beforehand. Tournament organizers really need to be firm on what they're going to allow and what they're not going to allow, so that there's no confusion as far as the status of these wild cards or not. But again, I think it's pretty cool. All right, just to give you guys a idea of what we're doing, I'm probably going to do other videos covering each of the factions. So, you know, one for the Germans, one for the Italians, and so on. And make them a little bit shorter because it's a big book. It's basically four normal books crammed into it. It's a nice beefy book. So we'll be doing those and kind of talking over what North Africa is bringing to the table. I'm looking forward to playing more desert games, and I'm sure you're going to be seeing those on the channel shortly. All right, let me know what you guys think down below. Is this a big controversy? Is this going to blow up? Do you think people just blow it out of proportion? What do you guys think about the old mid-war monsters range? I'm curious. You know where I stand now. I just blabbered on for a while. But let's hear it in the comments below. I always like hearing from you guys, as always. All right, well, that's it for me today. As always, I thank you guys for watching. If you do like our Flames of War content, do check out our Patreon, where patrons get access to an exclusive Flames of War battle report just for them every month. You can also give us a like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate that. Click that bell to receive notification when we release new content. As always, thanks for watching, and keep on gaming.